Welcome to my realm, mortals. I'm the Shadow Walker, and I'll be your guide for today's, well, rather dark explainer of our ancient source material. We're gonna dive right into a grim tale today. It's a story of a high-stakes heavenly wager, a ridiculously lazy boy, and the absolutely terrifying cost of unearned power. Think of it as an exploration into the architecture of mastery, but told entirely from the perspective of the abyss. Okay, let's get into it. Picture this. Our story kicks off in the High Hall. It's this majestic realm where the golden Empyrean light crashes right into the shifting, freezing mists of Niflheim. And it was right there that I looked at the stern High Master Votan and proposed a pretty serious wager. I wanted to test the incredibly fragile nature of human ambition. I told him, I bet my seat in the hall that if I show a mortal a shortcut through the shadow, they'll choose the unearned power of the abyss every single time over the slow, agonizing path of deep expertise and discipline. To prove my point, I directed Wotan's gaze downward to this pathetic, flickering little spark on the mortal plane. This was a young magician's apprentice named Friedrich. Now, Friedrich was studying our ancient runes, but certainly not for enlightenment. Oh no. He was using them merely to escape the minor, agonizing drudgery of his daily chores. Talk about a pitiful use of ancient secrets, right? There's a really stark contrast we need to look at here. I was mocking this boy to the High Master because Friedrich's desires were entirely micro-level. They were born purely out of mundane laziness. Now compare that to someone like Goethe's Faust. Faust's errors were massive, right? But they were rooted in a calculated, grand, macro-level ambition to touch the infinite. Faust wanted to transcend mortal limitations. Little Friedrich, he literally just didn't want to lift heavy things.
But the High Master, being the ever-stern protector that he is, struck his ash spear against the floor in defense of the boy. He insisted that true mastery absolutely requires the slow, agonizing grind of physical limits. He told me he is but an apprentice. He learns humility and boundaries through the sheer mundane weight of the bucket.
Part 1. The Mundane Trial. And so the wager was struck, and we turned our immortal eyes downward to watch it play out. The Master Sorcerer, who was basically an earthly shadow of Votan himself, abandoned Friedrich out in the courtyard. He left the boy staring at this towering mountain of heavy stones that needed moving from the garden all the way to the high wall. His command was totally uncompromising. Move them by hand, for in the weight of the stone you find the weight of the self. No magic allowed, just bone, muscle, and stone.
Part 2. The Dark Shortcut. Now, the very second that earthly master vanished from sight, the real trial began. I slipped seamlessly into the corner of Friedrich's eye, and I offered him a very sinister piece of magic, the Dark Double. I whispered to him, why labor like a beast of burden when a shortcut through the abyss is sitting right at your fingertips? This ancient shadow rune of Mephistopheles was his for the taking. All he had to do was invoke it, and his shadow would detach and bleed for him while he just sat back and rested. And he took the bait. Hook, line, and sinker, completely oblivious to the golden rule of magic and mastery. Driven by nothing but foolish ignorance, Friedrich drew the rune. He knew the precise words to initiate the process, sure, but in his lazy haste, he completely lacked the critical knowledge required to actually stop it. He wanted all that unearned power, but none of the deep expertise. Part 3. Compounding the Disaster. So here is where things really go off the rails. His shadow violently tears itself right from his feet, growing tall and muscular, and it starts moving those stones with this mindless, chaotic energy. And the terrifying part? It didn't stop once the wall was built. Once Friedrich realized he had lost control, absolute panic seized him. His hubris blinded him to any kind of rational problem-solving, so he grabs a silver ritual blade, genuinely convinced he could just chop his mistake out of existence.
But as we all know, taking a shortcut to avoid hard labor always extracts a higher toll. By attempting to forcefully kill the magic with his blade, Friedrich didn't fix anything. He merely split the entity into two darker demons. And now, each new shadow was working twice as fast to dismantle his world. The mindless energy turned entirely destructive. They actually began tearing stones from the Master's ancient tower itself, trying to build a wall all the way to the clouds. He hadn't fixed his error, he had catastrophically compounded it.
Part 4. The Master Returns.
Just as the ancient tower groaned and was literally about to crumble under the weight of his rampaging mistakes, the master sorcerer returned. He walked right into the boy's self-inflicted apocalypse. But notice what happens next. It wasn't frantic, violent action that saved the boy. Order was restored through hierarchical wisdom. With a single word of absolute authority, the master forced those shadows right back to the boy's feet. True power, you see, isn't magic. It's discipline and an absolute reverence for deep expertise.
When we look at the philosophical bones of this source material, the stark contrast really jumps out. Look at the nature of the error and the source of the resolution. Unlike Faust, who messed up out of a grand intellectual desperation and had to earn his redemption through a lifetime of brutal internal existential struggle, this pathetic apprentice erred through simple, foolish ignorance. And because of that, he required a physical, external savior, his master, to clean up a mess that was born purely out of mundane laziness.
The master looked down at the kneeling, completely terrified boy. And with a gaze of stern mercy, he delivered a totally crushing, definitive verdict. He said, "You sought to master the shadow before you mastered the stone. Faust's errors were born of a desperate search for the divine. Yours were born of a desire to avoid the mundane."
Part 5. Escaping the Mundane.
Following that little earthly spectacle, we returned to the High Hall. The trial was over, and well, I must confess to you, I lost my wager. Yes, the boy absolutely succumbed to the dark temptation. But the resulting chaos, the sheer terror of his own inadequacy, it finally taught him the vital limits of his own competence. He returned to the stones, but this time he found the soul within the labor. He finally gained some respect for true mastery.
So, what about you, mortal? As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a question from the shadows. Watching from the safety of the light, take a hard look at your own life. Are you secretly seeking to master the shadow before you've mastered the weight of your own stone? Are you relying on dark shortcuts to avoid the necessary, agonizing weight of your own daily burdens? Beware of unearned power, my friends. You might know the words to start the magic, but completely lack the wisdom to survive it. Until next time, mind your shadows.